Since October 2019, Lebanon has been on the verge of economic collapse. For months, protesters filled Beirut's streets, demanding an end to the government corruption they blame for inflation, soaring unemployment, and unaffordable food prices. The pandemic only made the situation worse. Now, this crisis upon a crisis is even changing the way Lebanese people eat.
لازم نبلش ذبح بعد شوي.
امتى بلشت الشغل هيك؟
بلشت شغل إلي 12 سنة أنا لحام.
للبنانيين اللحمة كتير مهم للأكل.
طبعاً.
أنتوا بتاكلوا لحمة كتير.
معودين كتير على اللحمة، يعني فيك تقول شبه يومي. هلا مر علينا نحن فترة كاقتصاد كتير همد فخلى العالم لحم بقر ما بقى عم تاكل. يعني أنا واحد من الناس بالملحمة إلي شهر ونص ما جايب غنم.
عن جد.
كنت أنا 3 خميس سبت راس 3-4 روز غنم بالجمعة. شوي خففنا صرنا نجيب راسين بالجمعة، راس بالجمعة، وقفت الغنم. كتير غالي وبيعه كتير قليل.
Anxiety about money has never been higher, meaning for many Lebanese, meat is now only for special occasions. Like today, when Muslims are preparing to celebrate Eid al-Adha, the feast of the sacrifice. Traditionally, that sacrifice is a sheep, butchered based on Islamic law to be halal. Families like the Ridas, who can still afford a lamb for the holiday, are paying double what they did for sheep last year.
هلا كله صار هون كله صار بالكيس كله حنوزعه هلا.
اللي ذبح الخروف لأهل البيت بياخذوا شوي حصة ولأهليهم شوي والباقي بيروح للفقراء.
غيرتي كيف تطبخي أكل مثلا بشكل عام يعني مشان الوضع الاقتصادي والصحة؟
أكيد استعنا بالخضرة أكثر من اللحومات وكمان صحي أكثر.
A 100% increase in the poverty rate means life has changed for most in Beirut. Even for Antoine El Hajj, a celebrity chef who's hosted his own daily cooking show for the last 30 years.
أول شيء حنسوي لوبي بالكاري، لأول مرة بنسويها هالأكلة، كلكم معودين على دجاج بالكاري ولكن لوبي بالكاري مش معودين، ولكن
قديش غير المطبخ اللبناني من وقت الكورونا أزمة الأكل؟
هلا من جائحة كورونا لليوم تغير تقريبا كثير المطبخ، ولكن لأني اللحم أنا كمان كنت أحب كثير اللحم. صار لي أكثر من 4 أشهر مش أكل كبدة بالصينية مرة واحدة، ومش معقول أنا إجي أعمل برنامج اللي صار لي 30 سنة بعمل برنامج يومي والناس كلها بتحضرني وبتشوفني، إجي ناس مش قادرة تجيب وقية لحم، أنا جيب كيلو لحم اشتغلهم فيه. هذا منه منطق، يعني بالعكس أنا بدي أكون مع المشكلة اللي عم نمر فيها وطننا لبنان، منشان هيك بنستعمل طرق بالأكل منيحة مناسبة وبالوقت ذاته إنه هذا الشيء بيوفر على الجيبة.
Lebanon's dire situation got even worse in August, when a massive explosion in Beirut killed more than 190 people, caused billions of dollars in property damage, and destroyed the country's largest port. Lebanon had depended on that port to bring in 80% of its food. That reliance on imported food had already driven some people to find solutions, beyond just switching their diets.
I'm growing I think more than 100 types of food. Citrus trees, avocados, mangoes.
Karim El Hassan was a cafe owner in Beirut before closing up his shop and returning to his hometown.
My decision to come back was merely for just security. I found it really futile to try to seek a flow of income so I can use that income and spend it on food while I can actually just grow my own. So here's my lab. That's a sample of the things we process and stock. Eggplants, cucumbers, and mette, pickles, some herbs. I don't believe a lot of people are content. They're not satisfied and they want to continue affording meat and chicken almost on a daily basis, which is so unhealthy and it's abnormal. The system is setting us up for failure and they're stretching it out as much as possible. They're milking us to the last penny. I really fear for the future. I don't think we have a bright future coming. You don't have a choice. Either you sit and you fight or just migrate, leave.
Welcome back, everybody. So let's talk about, what does an American food collapse actually look like? Now, I know a lot of people out there in the community throw out different ideas of what this may look like, right? A lot of people in the community throw out ideas of there just not being any food, like one day the food supply lines just stop. Other people talk about, a pandemic type event where animals are just all destroyed by some kind of pestilence or virus or disease, right? Other people talk about the fact that, farmers just stop growing, inability to grow food based upon the Dalton cycle. I know Ice Age Farmer has talked a lot about the Dalton cycle and talked a lot about, overall cooling to where ranchers and farmers are just unable to grow food. Now, these are all possibilities, right? To me, they're extremely conspiratorial. But if I look at the science and I look at the gravity of everything from a scientific point of view, science, logic, mathematics, biology, even chemistry, right? If I look at it from those lens, what really I see is a trend that we can see right now everywhere in the world. We can see this trend right now. So I'm going to put some screenshots up for you guys to look at, and then we're going to take a deeper dive into the actual nuance of this conversation of what a food collapse in America actually looks like. So let's stay tuned. So as you guys can see from the graph and charts, we spend significantly less here in America and in Canada than the rest of the world does on food when it comes to take-home per capita, right? Take-home wages. So here in America, pre-COVID, we're talking anywhere between 6.5% to 10% of take-home income was spent on food. Same with in Canada. In other developing nations that many people in the preparedness community consider to be competitors, Russia, China, we see a vastly different story. We see in Russia 30% of take-home income is spent on food, and in China we see that the upper middle class spend about 20% of take-home income on food, and urban and rural communities will spend upwards of 45% on take-home wages on food. And why is this important? Because I think that when we're talking about this conversation, we leave out a lot of important substance topics that you're not going to see covered on Ice Age Farmer, that you're not going to see covered on a lot of these, agricultural news sources and news sites that want to really talk about the deep-rooted conspiracies of, big dirty money, and want to talk about the big conspiracies of, possible red tape legislation, which is all important. It's all encompassing. Don't get me wrong there. It is important. But I think that takes a lot of responsibility off the individual person, because I can tell you all those things, they sound really conspiratorial, and it really gets you going, because it's like, yeah, we found the people that are responsible. Yeah, go get them. But they completely ignore the real life implications that matter, and that is what we as people do day to day. Let me explain. We know that in Russia and China, like I said, easily a third of their income, if not more, is being spent on food. So let's take this from some nuanced perspective. We know here in the United States of America, especially in this, new COVID world, that prices of livestock and prices of animals are going up. There's no doubt about that. And so what's important to us, and I believe it's important for all of us to realize, is really the following fundamental key here. We are used to a certain standard of living here in the United States of America, here in Canada. For example, the average American has at least, on average, $90,000 worth of personal debt. That's not talking about debt to GDP ratios. Not talking about any of that. That is literally talking about personal debt. Here in America, we live way outside of our in general, we live way outside of our means, right? And we can do so. We're encouraged to do so. 18-year-olds are encouraged to get into hundreds of thousands of dollars of college student loan debt. They are encouraged to do that. We live in a debt dependency world here in the US and in Canada. So we know that the average American has tens of thousands of dollars of credit card debt, hundreds of thousands of dollars of home loans, student loans, things like that. We don't see those types of debt crises in other countries because the legislative and the infrastructure is not set up for it. You can't expect to be an 18-year-old Russian kid and say, you know what, I want to accrue $300,000 worth of US dollar student debt. It just doesn't happen. We don't see that in China either. It doesn't happen. But what we do see in these nations is prioritizing food. We see that, and prioritizing savings. For example, in China, on average, 25% at the low end, 50% at the upper end of take-home income is being put into savings in China, for example. Why are they saving so much? Why are they even attempting to save so much? Why are they trying to live so much within their means? Well, it's very clear, and I'll leave all these sources in the description box below for you guys to look at. But it's because they don't have Social Security. They don't have these safety net services that we see here in more developed countries. They just don't have that. So you see a lot of them doing what they can to insulate themselves from problems in the future. Right or wrong, that's just what the fuck they're doing. So when we look at this from an American lens, we have to realize that we are spending less on food because, number one, our food is highly subsidized. Billions of dollars each year go from taxpayer money goes into agriculture and, subsidizing it so it's more affordable. Well, what's the problem with that? Every dollar you subsidize, that dollar's worth less. So all you're doing is you're really just buying time until the standard is unsustainable from an economic perspective. And I don't believe that we really have to go down the rabbit trail to see, right? There's no rabbit trail here to go down. We know that food prices are going up. We know the prices of livestock are going up, and we know those prices on us are going up. So when you are an average American that is already $90,000 in debt, that is living above their social economic standing based upon what they can provide therein, if we were to just go to the same standard as our competing countries at 20 to 30% of take home going to food, instantly you have a collapse. Mathematically, you have a collapse. I mean, we see Escalades, California, Houston, Texas, Seattle, driving into food lines because they can't afford food. They can afford an Escalade. Why is that? Because they live way above their means. Credit cards are maxed out. Everything's maxed out. And so they need help with food. Well, food prices go up to what our competitors are already paying and what they have already prioritized based upon their economic standing. You will see a collapse of the food system. Overnight, you will see a food collapse. This should scare the shit out of you, but this is not conspiracy. This is fact. We factually know that Americans live this way. Go outside, look outside, look at your neighbors. Look at what you see in the city. We know these people are spending way outside their means. I'm not saying other countries don't do that, but not to the vast standing that we do. I mean, just look at the national debt calculators of the US versus China and Russia, and that'll explain everything you need to know just from their economic policies. Right or wrong or indifferent, that's the factual argument that I'm presenting to you. In America, we live outside our means. We have debt on average. Average American has a lot of debt. And so we have become dependent on the current infrastructure in place to do what it's currently doing, and that is insulating us from actual real prices. Long story short, if Americans had to pay anywhere near the real price of food, you're going to see a collapse of the economy and collapse of the food agricultural system. Our just-in-time supply system goes away instantaneously. That is why we subsidize so hard. Like I said, if you are expected to go to the store and pay $12 for a pound of ground beef, what's that going to do to the supply chain? What kind of panic is that going to cause? If you have to pay $8 or $9 for a pound of chicken, what's that going to do? Honestly, it's an honest question. What's going to happen to the food supply system? To me, it's very clear. It's going to collapse, right? We don't need one of these crazy Dalton minimum environmental conspiracies to happen, right? We don't need that. We don't need conspiracies of red tape bureaucracy. We don't need that. We just need food prices to be the same for Americans as it is for people in other countries from a take-home, from a take-home percentage, and you've 100% accomplished your goal. Because guess what? These other developing countries, they're already spending the actual money on food, and guess what? They're wanting more of it. As they develop, they're going to need more resources for their people. It's kind of like, let me give you a great example, the Middle East, right? The Middle East didn't start off as it was developing, but they didn't have their own citizens didn't drive cars. Now you see lots of areas in the Middle East, Dubai, Kuwait, Iraq, Iran, Syria, that are starting to industrialize. And more of their population is starting to drive cars, meaning that they need more of their own oil. Right? So it's very clear that what we're seeing happening in place is simply no conspiracy. Take the conspiracy hat off. You don't need it for this argument. You absolutely don't need it. What happens when Americans that do American things and Canadians that do Canadian things are forced to play in the same sandbox as the rest of the world? Collapse. Like I said, you can't expect somebody that's $90,000 in debt that lives above their income threshold to now spend actual price of food. You just can't. There'll be a collapse. That's all you need for a collapse here in the United States of America. It does not need to be the scary conspiracy theory, which to me is even more frightening. I mean, how frightening is that? For all you need for the collapse of the food sector is for prices to be the same as what other countries are having to spend per take home. If that doesn't scare you to, start thinking about this stuff, nothing will. I mean, like I said, that to me, that's everything I need to know. And we're seeing it. I mean, I was talking with my wife today earlier. We have babies. We have a male sheep. And I was like, hey, do you want to hold on to them, put them in the freezer? Do you want to sell them? And it actually turned into a kind of an in-depth conversation because we've been going into our freezer a lot because we have been selling out livestock. I mean, it hasn't even been hard. Like, I don't even have to post when it comes to cattle and when it comes to sheep. I don't even have to post them. I don't post them because there's such a need from word of mouth of people around me and people that I know on other homesteads. I don't need to. I just need to reach out to somebody who's already told me, hey, if you have a ram, let me know. If you have a ewe, let me know. I got you. So for those, I don't even post. The only thing I've been posting is chickens, ducks, and rabbits, because everything else I don't need to post. And for the rabbits, I have 2 available. They're no longer available. I have 3 females with litters, and a lot of those are already accounted for. So the real scary thing is, Kova hasn't had a rabbit in 7 months. Everybody, welcome back. We're shooting part 2 of this video because I guess when I uploaded it on YouTube, for some reason it cut off and you guys didn't have it. You guys let me know in the comment section below. So I decided that I was just going to re-upload it. But with everything that's happened in the last few days, we're going to take this video in a completely different direction. Talking about the same stuff, but we're going to go in a completely different direction because I really think that it's just important that we talk brass tacks here, okay? And so that's what I want to talk about with you right now because I've had a lot of important conversations with people and we're going to put that in another video. So I'm going to make another video just on the conversations I've had with everyday people, but let's just focus on the brass tacks bulletin points here, okay? There's a lot of preppers out there. There's a lot of people out there that are talking about the Dalton minimum. They're talking about global supply food chains. They're talking about war and all this other stuff, that climate catastrophes, right? All these people are talking about all these large systematic things that are going to happen that are going to crash the food system as we know it. I don't believe in any of that garbage. We can have conversations about it, and if you're looking for a good scary story to put yourself to sleep at night, by all means, indulge. I don't believe in any of that garbage. What I do see and what I do understand is everything from just a fiscal monetary standpoint, okay? And I think it's crazy that I have to make note of this because I think it's so obvious, but we're going to do so. We're going to do so anyway. So take a look at what we've been seeing just in the last year, right? We have seen people that have nice houses drive Escalades, nice cars, Audis, you name it. Seattle, all over California, Houston, Texas, that are now going to food lines to buy food because the price of food has gone up, right? And because, COVID impacts and this and that and the other. So you have to ask yourself, as a normal logical person, why is it that somebody that has a really nice car, a really nice house, now can't afford food? They're able to afford their housing and vehicle to some extent, but they can't buy food. And the real answer and the real question you really have to ask yourself is not the why, but what is. Because the what is this. Here in America, especially in America, we spend way above our means, right? Our standard and our quality of life comes from us spending outside of our means. In other places of the world, there's not an infrastructure set up that allows them to do so. You're not going to find in other places of the world where an 18-year-old college student or just an 18-year-old child or adult, however you want to split the demographic up, can go and get themselves into $300,000 worth of debt. You just can't do that in other nations because the infrastructure won't allow it. But here in America, it's encouraged, right? So you have to realize that this comes from a fundamental understanding of how we think. Now, obviously, the answer that makes the most sense for us prepared-minded people is simply this: downsize, right? Get a more economic car. Do you really need to have a house that has 5 bedrooms in it? These are all good questions that a reasonable person would ask yourself. But then you have to realize the economy is not built up on people like you. They're built up on people like that. So the only thing that is going to force them to realize and see the situation for what is what? Collapse. It's for them to be forced to see it. So right now, they're going to go through and circumnavigate all the safety nets available to them to make that work. I mean, you got to ask yourself, look at the 2008 bubble. Yeah, it's horrible. We can blame big banks. You can do all that. You can do all that stuff. Rah, rah, rah. I get it. But at what point did you think it was good, the fact that you had horrible credit, you made minimum wage, you had a pulse and thought you could afford a house, that was $300,000, $400,000 on the low end? The reason why I just kind of giving you this look is because it should be remotely obvious to anybody that has half a brain cell, right? But the reason why it happened anyway is because you gave people the ability to do it, so they're going to do it. You are making so many preppers and so many people that look at this are making the assumption that people are just going to do the right thing. Nobody's going to force that Audi or that Escalade out of those people's cold dead hands unless it is forced upon them by some kind of catastrophe or collapse. And I don't believe that catastrophe and collapse is going to come from some kind of environmental issue, or going to come from some kind of Dalton minimum issue, or it's going to come from some kind of global supply chain issue. I just don't see it happening. I see them just being priced out of it, like we've seen in every other aspect in human history that we can look at. As simple as that. When you are expecting people in America to pay, let's just take developing competitor nations that many people see as competing nations, China and Russia. When you're seeing them pay upwards of 30% in Russia or 20% for the upper middle class in China, that's just an everyday reality for them. So when you're going to force Americans to play in the same sandbox as everybody else, that's when we're going to see the collapse. And it's not going to be the collapse of, oh my gosh, Mad Max situation. You're going to see a collapse like you saw in 2008. People just not having the ability to purchase food because of basic understanding of how they spend money, right? When Americans are used to spending 6.57% of their take-home income on food, and now they're expected to play in the same sandbox as Russians and Chinese, and the Chinese people, or just the EU, right? If you're expecting somebody that's used to paying 7% of take-home for food, and now they're having to just spend 17%, you're literally just asking them to pay double in order to be on the same playing field as their European counterparts, not much less their Russian or Chinese counterparts. I mean, do you understand the implication of what that is? If you're spending $5, $5.99 on chicken, beef, pork, whatever it is, and you come in the next day and that same product is now $14. Fuck, right? That is what it's going to be. And so I think a lot of people don't understand that narrative because people, for some reason, think that people are going to make the right decisions. They're not going to change their behavior until they're forced to, like we've seen in every other historic precedents before. So I think it's important that we look at that logically, okay? So that's the first portion. The second portion I think it's important that we touch on is the fact that there's a lot of people out there that really think that if I stockpile enough, if I hoard enough, that somehow I'll be able to make it out of the situation without any issues. Not exactly the case. I've seen no metric, and I've had a lot of people try to explain it to me. I've seen no metric in where that makes sense. Now, am I saying that you shouldn't have food stored up or a large working pantry? I'm not saying that. But ultimately, when you're stockpiling, like I've said so many times before, all you're doing is you're liquidating your assets. And in no other portion of your life do you do that. In no other portion of business do you do that. In no other portion of your relationships do you do that. In no other portion of your life do you think and feel that the model of stockpiling, hoarding, and liquidating assets is a winning strategy. Like I said, you don't do it in business, right? You just don't say, oh, we did so good in my first year of business that we can just live off the curtails of that. You don't do that. You don't do that when it comes to your relationships. Well, I treated my wife, I treated my child, I treated my brother, I treated my uncle, I treated my friends with so much respect in the beginning that the whole relationship just can be carried off of what I've stockpiled here. And then if it gets lower here, I'll just stockpile again. We don't find that as a winning strategy in any other portion of our life. But for some reason, when it comes to preparedness, which people claim to be the most important part of their life, it's somehow the game-winning strategy. So I'm not saying not to have large, robust pantries. But if you are looking at this from a logical standpoint, when you're putting yourself on a timer and when you're liquidating assets, expect to have those results. Simply put, I expect everybody that stockpiles and hoards and does so as a winning strategy to have the end results be exactly what you're claiming it to be, even though you think it's going to be somehow on another spectrum of success. If it was successful, you'd be doing it in all aspects of your life. Now let's talk about the third thing that I think is really the solution for you, right? And by solution, this is just my hope, right? I'm not asking people to grow food because I know I have a lot of people that are anti-homesteading, anti-permaculture, anti-gardening, anti-raising livestock. You guys just don't believe in producing anything. That's fair. And I implore you, if you feel like the stockpile and hoarding thing, if for nothing else makes you feel better about yourself, I don't want you to stop on my behalf. But if there's anything I can get you to think about and to put a number on, it would be this, okay? At what point does the threshold for your take-home income going on food hit that threshold where you think maybe I should do something, right? Is that 15% of your take-home, 20, 25, 30? Or maybe you have to wait till things are really bad, like we see in Lebanon, Nigeria, and other places where you're looking at 60, 65+% of take-home incomes going on food. Because like that young man in the beginning of this video so eloquently pointed out, and I thought it was great, and that quote from him is really the whole focus of this video. Entrepreneur, owned a cafe, business owner. He couldn't have said it more perfect, if you ask me. Why should he invest capital, sweat, tears, energy in a business that is going to give him fiat currency to which he's now going to take and spend the majority of that fiat currency just on food? Why would he put all that time and effort into growing food when he could just cut out the middleman and do it himself? Because that's security. It is. Food is security. And we have taken advantage of that so much in our country just because of the fact that we can get it so cheap, right? 6.5% to 10%. That's pretty good. But what we're failing to realize is the reason why our food bill, and a lot of people are claiming it's going up, and we see it's going up. A lot of people are complaining it's going up. You have to look at the gravity of the situation. The government spends billions of dollars here in the United States of America every year to subsidize food. So they spend billions of dollars to subsidize lower quality, crappier food at a higher price. That is where the collapse is going to come from. Because every dollar we subsidize and we pull out of thin air is a dollar that's worth less. So subsidizing the issue is just putting off the inevitable, just like stockpile and hoarding. So that's a simple question I have for you guys. Simply put, at what point is that threshold enough for you to realize and stop and say, hey, you know what? Maybe I should cut out the middleman. And I'm not saying grow food. Maybe it's as easy as finding somebody who has a good egg, who sells eggs and they have a good egg system going. And, maybe that means, hey, I can buy crappier quality eggs at the grocery store at $3 to $4 a dozen, or I can buy it from this homestead at $5 a dozen. So yeah, I'm spending $2 more, which is higher, but I have a consistent food supply coming in, and I know the person, and these are the rudimentary costs, right? So maybe that's you understanding local food production, or maybe it's you putting a little more time and effort and finding bulk purchases from local farms that are going to be meeting the price points that you would see at the grocery store, but requires a little bit of work on your end because you have to go in on it with other people. A lot of that stuff exists. And I'm not here to, this video is not for giving you guys solutions, but ultimately, what's that threshold? What's that threshold for you? I'm curious. Let me know in the comment section below. What's the threshold by which you realize, you know what, I can't depend on this food agricultural system anymore? Curious to know. If you guys think you can explain to me why stockpile and hoarding is a good thing, please let me know in the comment section below. And I'm sure some of you guys are going to put down, you guys are going to be upset about me not believing these conspiracies when it comes to climate, Dalton minimum, and all these supply chain issues. Let me know if you got some good information. Let me know in the comment section below. I look forward to hearing from you guys. I look forward to interacting with you guys there in the comment section below. So I hope you guys have a great day. Please go out there, do your homework, find what that threshold is for you, and ensure that whatever steps you take, you keep in mind that the price is going to continuously go up. I know you guys are smart. I know you guys will find solutions. Again, let me know in the comment section below. As always, guys, long live the Republic.